Have you ever felt it? A profound stillness that settles deep within you. It is not sadness, nor is it loneliness. It is a unique and sacred quietude. The world around you might misinterpret this as emptiness. They might suggest you are withdrawn, distant, or disconnected. But what if this perception is incomplete? What if the silence you carry is not a void, but the very space where your inner self can finally be heard? What if your distance from the world is actually your journey back to yourself? Because so often when a woman ceases the outward chase for connection, she begins the inward journey of remembering her own nature. In our time, more than ever, we are conditioned to see silence as a kind of failure. The unringing phone, the absence of another's touch, the lack of being desired, these are framed as a loss of value. Stillness is mistaken for lack. Solitude is confused with shame. Yet consider if the truth is the very opposite. The fundamental laws of energy show that whatever is not projected outward must turn inward. And when a woman, by decision or by destiny, steps away from the currents of fleeting intimacy, something timeless begins to stir. The energy once spent seeking external validation begins its powerful journey inward. In that deep descent, she does not disappear. She emerges. This is not absence. This is a profound realignment. Her own true spirit, long obscured by the noise of want, finally begins to speak. And its message is this: you were never lacking. You have always been the source. Have you noticed that following a season of quiet solitude, your dreams become more vivid, your intuition clearer, and your senses more intensely alive? This is not a mere consequence. It is your own true essence returning to its center. When your physical form stops searching for an external anchor, it begins to recall its own inherent strength. And in that remembrance, a sacred awareness is awakened. You start to feel more, to perceive more, not just with your eyes, but with a deeper sense of knowing. You begin to see past the performance of affection, beyond the masks that desire wears to look like love, and through the narratives you once accepted just to feel chosen. You recognize how often you mistook being selected for being truly seen. Then one day, the old hunger subsides, the need to be touched, to be seen, to be affirmed. It dissolves because you have tasted something more nourishing, your own presence. You are no longer willing to trade your inner peace for a momentary spark. You no longer chase the rush of a temporary bond. You find home in stillness, in depth, in truth. The world can become unsettled by the woman who chooses herself because her path is no longer predictable. She becomes like a force of nature. She begins to move with a different intention, not to attract, but to stand her ground. Her energy becomes potent, not by being loud, but by being centered. She ceases to seek permission. And because of this, she develops a groundedness that cannot be replicated. One might say she has made peace with all parts of herself, especially those she once hid to be accepted in love. The part of her that was never weak, the part that was never waiting for another to arrive. And now that she has seen this inner truth, truly seen it, she cannot unsee it. Her quiet becomes a source of inner light. You see, when a woman stops endlessly giving her energy away, some may begin to describe her as reserved, detached, or difficult. But the reality is, she is simply focused, not on what is missing, but on what is essential. She is no longer striving to be loved by others. She is cultivating such a deep, sustaining love for herself that anything not in alignment simply falls away. This is not isolation. This is a sacred homecoming. It is the journey of becoming whole. A woman on this path might seem still on the surface, but within her, her entire inner world is finding its true alignment. She is releasing old stories, illusions, and the need to be needed that never truly made her feel known. She no longer asks, "Why did they not see my worth?" She now understands the deeper question is, "Why did I forget my own worth for so long?" Her life may be quiet, yes, but that silence, it is the sound of roots growing deeper and stronger than ever before, so that one day, if she chooses to connect with another, it will not come from a place of need. It will not be born from scarcity. It will spring from wholeness, from fullness. And only one who has traveled his own inner path will recognize her. Only one who has undertaken his own journey will know how to meet a woman who radiates not from want, but from presence. So if you find yourself in that quiet season now, if you are not being held, if you are not being sought, if the world's noise has faded around you, do not feel lost. You are not empty. You are in a sacred process of becoming. And a woman who walks this path of becoming will never again settle for a connection that is ordinary. What happens to a woman when she stops waiting for the world to see her? When she no longer molds herself into shapes she believes are desirable, when her essence is no longer a performance, but simply her presence. What occurs when she no longer starves for the attention of others, but begins to truly see herself? This is the moment when the world quiets around her. But this is not the silence of absence. It is the silence that comes from inner expansion. There is a moment on a woman's journey inward when an irreversible shift begins to happen. It is quiet, nearly invisible, yet it changes the very ground she stands on. She no longer chases validation. This is not because she is jaded, nor because she has resigned herself to less. It is because she has started to experience something far more profound than being wanted. She has begun to know what it is to be complete within herself. And from that state of wholeness, the need to be chosen dissolves. This is where her spirit becomes truly grounded, not because she is far away, but because she is rooted in her own being, rooted in a truth that does not depend on the shifting attention of another. Ancient wisdom might call this the great turning point on the inner path, where the spirit starts to disengage from the illusions of a created identity. From the self that performs for others, it begins to live from something timeless and foundational. The woman starts to embody stillness not as a void, but as a source of strength. And for a moment, the world may not understand her, because the woman who no longer requires to be loved in order to feel alive is a deep well. And in a culture that often prefers predictable streams, a deep well can seem mysterious. She is no longer a fraction of a whole. She is not waiting for another to complete her story. She moves with the light of a full moon, bright, whole, and luminous in her own right. But this journey is not without its challenges. It often begins with a quiet restlessness, a deep, unseen ache that poses a question she cannot yet articulate. She has stepped back from the dance of desire, and now it feels as if the world no longer sees her. She doesn't fit the familiar roles, the pursuer, the pursued, the constant companion. She is simply herself, and in that simplicity she can become a challenge even to her own mind. Doubts may arise. Have I taken a wrong turn? Am I isolating myself? Am I losing my chance at connection, at love? The voice of the outer world can grow loud. Don't be alone for too long. You will be passed by. A woman's time is precious. Yet inside her, something else is stirring, something more ancient, something more true. This is not isolation. It is deep immersion. She is not fading away. She is journeying into the quiet depths of her being, to the parts of herself she had to set aside to please others and perform a role. The wise traditions teach that this descent is necessary. It's the passage where the constructed self begins to soften its grip and the deeper intuitive nature starts to lead. And yes, it is uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, because she can no longer find comfort in the old ways. The casual invitations, the half-hearted connections, the familiar but empty interactions, they may appear offering a temporary escape, but her inner knowing whispers, "You have outgrown this." And so she continues, not as a sacrifice, but with the understanding that this is not a punishment, it is a passage. Every old temptation is a new test of her resolve. Every moment of quiet is a gateway. The cocoon of change may feel tight. Her old self may grieve, but she holds her ground because she senses something profound is being born. Not a person, not a rescuer, herself. A deeper self, a more integrated self, one that no longer thrives on praise, approval, or being needed. She is not breaking down, she is breaking through. And those around her may not comprehend this path. Friends might encourage her to be more social, to find someone, to get back out there. But what they perceive as withdrawal is in fact a ritual. She is in a sacred dialogue with herself, in communion with a language our busy world has largely forgotten, a language of intuition, insight, and stillness. She is starting to reconnect with the flow of life that serves as a bridge between her conscious mind and her inner depths. And in this internal conversation, she learns that she is not alone, that her discomfort is not a sign of failure, and that her silence is not a void. It is clear space for something truly authentic to take root. Her body isn't in a holding pattern, it is in preparation, and when she finally begins to feel that profound shift, when the ache of quiet transforms into a sacred curiosity, she begins to ask new questions. Why did I believe I needed to be wanted to feel my own worth? Why did I confuse being seen with being deeply understood? Why was I taught that true affirmation must come from outside myself? As these questions resonate deeper, so does her sense of freedom. She starts to see that the emptiness she once feared was never empty at all. It was simply a space being cleared for truth. And in that truth, she realizes she no longer needs someone to choose her, because she has already chosen herself. From this place of deep, unwavering inner ground, no future connection will ever be the same. Because the woman who has learned to listen to the silence is not the same woman who once pleaded to be heard. What if the sense of absence you feel is not a loss? What if the quiet in your body is not a void? What if this deep ache, this subtle restlessness, this feeling of being unseen that you can't quite articulate is actually the sign of a profound rebirth? What if becoming whole first requires being misunderstood? There comes a time in the inner life of a woman when the waiting stops, not from resentment, but from deep understanding. She realizes there is nothing external to wait for. The silence that once felt like a form of abandonment now reveals itself as strength, a sacred stillness, a language understood only by those who have walked their own inner landscapes. This is the woman whose centeredness can be misread by the world, not because she is combative, but because her well-being no longer depends on it. She no longer pleads to be chosen, validated, or desired. She is no longer participating in that game, and to a system that thrives on the hunger of others that can feel unsettling. This might be described as a reunion with a deeper intuitive self, a timeless, forgotten communion buried beneath layers of conditioning. It is not loud, it is not performative, it does not need to be photographed, but it is profoundly sacred and it is real. Because that woman, the one who no longer seeks her reflection in the eyes of another, she is becoming unshakable. Not because she is unreachable, but because she has journeyed so deeply within that only those who carry a similar depth can ever truly meet her there. But this path is not always gentle. There is no parade, no applause, no external guidepost, only a quiet, searing discomfort that can linger just beneath the surface. Because when a woman withdraws from the constant dance of touch, glance, and external presence, she also steps away from everything that once defined her place of belonging. And in that initial space, what often arises first is discomfort, a stark, silent discomfort, as if she were invisible, as if the world could no longer register her existence, as if her refusal to play the familiar roles of desire has made her insignificant. But this is not erasure. It is alchemy. One could say this is the first true meeting with the parts of herself she had to silence. The compliant self, the pleasing self, the one who smiled through her own suppression. Now these energies are rising from within, unwilling to perform any longer. In that encounter, difficult questions may arise. Am I wasting my life? Am I going mad? Have I forsaken my chance at love? The noise of the system is loud. It insists her time is limited, that she must remain visible, wanted and pursued, that she must act now to stay in the game. But she is no longer bound by those rules. She is not defined by being a lover, a partner, or a source of inspiration for another. She is simply herself. And this can feel more vulnerable than any heartbreak, because this is not about being left by someone else. It is the shedding of who she used to be. And yes, a season of solitude can sometimes feel like a test, but it is not. It is an initiation, and only those with the courage to endure this kind of stillness will come to understand this is not loss. It is a sacred retreat. Not everyone will approve. Friends may see it as isolation. Family may advise her to get out and be busy. But what they interpret as solitude is actually immersion. She is diving into waters where others only dare to float. She is becoming who she was before the world taught her who to be. And that truth can be unsettling for others, because a woman who no longer needs anything from the outside becomes a mirror. She reflects back to others the places where they still seek attention, still negotiate for validation, still live in parts. But she remains on her path, even when it is hard, even when her past habits call to her, offering familiar comforts and easy connections. She remains, even when old patterns tempt her with the promise of feeling wanted again. She remains because she knows this ache is not a sentence. It is a preparation. This tension is not a sign of being wrong. It is the tightening of the cocoon just before the wings are ready. And deep down, even through moments of doubt, even through tears, she knows a new self is taking shape in that quiet dark. A woman who no longer needs to be pursued because she has become her own center, her own anchor, her own source. The great wisdom traditions speak of an intuitive flow that acts as a bridge between the conscious self and inner truth. She is now listening from that bridge, and it whispers, "You are not alone. This quiet is not the end. It is the beginning." The more she listens, the more she understands. Her body is not on pause. It is engaged in a ritual so ancient the modern world has largely forgotten it. But her soul remembers. And then, almost without her noticing, a fundamental shift begins. Restlessness transforms into reflection. pain softens into presence, and the questions begin to rise from a deeper wellspring. Why did I always need to be seen to feel that I was alive? Why did the absence of another feel like the absence of my own self? What part of me still believes it must be desired in order to exist? And as these questions echo in her being, something sacred awakens. She stops seeking connection as a distraction. She stops trading her essence for company, even if it means walking through long, silent nights. Even if it means being profoundly misunderstood, she knows her silence is not a void, it is protection. A sacred space being prepared not for another's arrival, but for her own wholeness. And when this transformation integrates, she sees that she no longer needs to be found, because she is the light now. She is the foundation. She is the answer. And those who come toward her next will either have to rise to meet her authentic light, or they will turn away, unready for its clarity. Can you feel this quiet call inside of you, that wordless recognition, that soft inner stirring, the sense that you no longer fit in places where you once felt you belonged? That is not weakness. That is the first sign of your becoming. Perhaps this message did not find you by accident. Maybe it is the reflection your own spirit has been searching for. If this has spoken to something deep within you, do not dismiss it. Do not extinguish the small spark that has just been lit. Let it be. And if you feel so moved, share this perspective with another woman whose own quiet journey may be misunderstood. You are welcome to leave a reflection to speak your own insight. And if you wish to walk this path in deeper community, you are invited to stay connected to this space, because here, every word is a seed, every quiet moment is sacred ground, and every reflection is a shared ritual. This is what endures. A woman who no longer fears the quiet because she can now hear what her own soul has always been whispering beneath the noise. You are not on the wrong path. You are returning home.